Welcome to the Mississippi Alliance's Alliance webinar. We used to do these weekly, as you remember back in 2020. We have pivoted to a monthly model, so that way we can go ahead and offer some additional events and opportunities that help sort of balance it out. So we appreciate you all taking the time to be here today. For those of you who are joining us after this recording, thank you for watching. Of course, if you have questions, always feel free to reach out. But with that, I want to go ahead and introduce our guest speaker and panelist today, who is with us from 48 and 48. Now, I have to tell you, when I first heard about this, it was one of those things where you hear it and you kind of say to yourself, that sounds really good, like really, really good, which makes me nervous because how can it be that good? And you know, what are the opportunity costs? And I got to tell you, after talking to our panelists, I'll introduce in just a moment, and learning more about their organization, this really is an incredible organization doing great work. So I'm happy they're going to be here today. So with that, let me introduce Seema Parekh. She has a background in technology program management and strategy, and supports organizations through transformation, execution, and growth. She is the Director of Operations Strategy and Programs, it's a mouthful, at IHG Hotels and Resort, and also serves as the Executive Director at 48 and 48. 48 and 48 is a nonprofit organization, so happy to have you in the house, supporting our fellow nonprofits in the world. And they host a hackathon, which we'll learn about, new vocabulary, a hackathon style event that create free websites for small nonprofits. Over the last 6 years, she has held various roles at 48 and 48 prior to taking over as the executive director. In the past year, she pivoted the organization from hosting on-site events to 100% virtual events. Her skills in strategy and execution have allowed her to help 48 and 48 continue to not only survive, but excel during the pandemic. You all, we are so incredibly fortunate to have Seema here with us, here and learn more about the work they do. And like I said, it's incredible. The journey they have been on and getting to know Seema and hear more about their work has just been mind-blowing. So thank you, Seema, for making the time in your very busy schedule to join the Alliance and help lift up nonprofits in Mississippi. So, and small nonprofits, which we love to support. We've got over 14,500 nonprofits in Mississippi. So lots of itty bitties out there that need all the love they can get. So with that, I'm going to stop talking and turn it over to our panelist here today. Seema, the floor is yours.
Okay, we figured out the muting and the unmuting. Well, thank you, Dave, for that intro. And thank you, everyone who has found time to join us this morning. I'm going to start by just telling you a little bit about 4848, like Dave mentioned. So 4848 is a nonprofit organization. We are based in Atlanta, and we've been around for about 6 years. Well, exactly 6 years. This is our 6th year. In our time of serving nonprofits, we've built over 950 nonprofits in the 6-year period, most of which have been built during the on-site pre-pandemic state. But last year, as Dave mentioned, we did pivot into all virtual, and we've continued to do all that. So with that, just a framework of where we sit, I'd like to go ahead and roll on to our presentation. So Dave is in control here. The reason that we work with nonprofits is because we realize that small nonprofits are giving back so much to the community, and we want to be there to support you. We want to support nonprofits from an awareness perspective, an empathy perspective, and also action. Action means helping you find volunteers that you need, donors that you need, and then also maybe being able to improve your digital footprint so that the people that need your services can also find you. Next slide. Okay, so how did we come about? So we basically came about because the co-founders thought, Jeff Hillmeyer, Adam Walker thought, well, you know, what could we possibly do? How do we continue to give back to the environment as, you know, the digital age is approaching? Everything is on the internet. It's so easy to reach more people. What could we do? So being that they were focused in these areas of marketing technology and digital marketing both together, they decided, what if we got some people together, found some nonprofits and built them a new website? Being that it was in their core skill set, they were like, we should be able to do this. So that's what they ended up doing. It was a test run, only supposed to happen once, but then as soon as they had one event pulled friends together, everyone sort of came back and said, can we do this again next year? So the important thing here was we were looking at what could we do and give back to our communities, meaning that we would do or host these events in different cities and give back in that manner. So each of the volunteer groups would come from the cities that they were serving. Therefore, then they were giving back to their own communities. We do this through corporate support. So obviously, there's a cost to bringing hundreds of people together, facilities, logistics, and then even execution. So our goal was to find the right group of people in order to make this happen. And 4848, next slide. 4848 is a global organization, and now 6 years later, because we built websites in multiple cities across the US and then also in London. And so our footprint is increasing. That means our volunteers now come from different parts of the world, and so do our nonprofits. So we've taken this huge leap, especially last year, to make sure that we've covered as many nonprofits that we can possibly do. And we do all of this pretty much by word of mouth. I consider ourselves to be like the best kept secret in Atlanta, because once you find out about us, then you're like, well, where have you been? Why have you not been advertised differently? Well, we were so focused on doing the work and delivering to our nonprofits, we didn't really think about it too much. And then it was like, all right, so it's mushrooming. Let's make sure that we're talking to the right groups. And therefore, when we connected with Dave, it was like just natural progression. I'm talking, me and my team, we're talking to larger groups now to just say, this is available if you're ready and interested in taking advantage of what we're offering. So if we go to the next slide, I'll show you a few of the sponsors that we've had. I think we skipped one. Okay, well, so here, this is how we do it. So basically, from a 4848 perspective, we are bringing marketing and technology volunteers together, and these are all professionals in their field. So 48 can build 48 websites in 48 hours. That's sort of how we get our name. It seems like a lot, but we've got a plan. We have a complete end-to-end strategy that works, and we know who we're recruiting. So that allows us to be able to do this work. And we would love to be able to one day do this event in 48 cities around the world. You know, all at the same time was the original goal. It might be a little bit different, but you know what? That's our vision. That's where we want to go. Next. All right, so then what are we bringing to the table? If we look at our service capabilities, right, we're bringing marketing expertise, we're bringing technology expertise. Our teams will create logos, they'll create brand standards, documents, social media, and impact labs are also available to the nonprofits. We look into education and training, which includes things like SEO and WordPress, email marketing campaigns, and then also digital marketing and social media campaigns. We bring all of this together. And then you're probably wondering, well, how can you bring this together? Because our volunteers have that skill set, they're donating their time over the weekend to give this back. This is their give back, as opposed to going and building a home for Habitat Humanity or something like that. Their give back is this skill set. So when you've tapped people that are great at this specific effort, it's relatively easy to pull out the pieces that are going to be most beneficial to a nonprofit like yours. So next, so why does this matter to you? So 4848, the reason this matters specifically to us, the reason we've targeted this much is that we've recognized that there are loads of charities that don't have the skill sets to build their own website, and it is quite costly if you try to go about it separately, and then it takes a lot of time, and most charities are so small that you don't have the resources to manage all the way through. You're so busy doing what you do for the community that this is considered more administrative. And if we could help lift that burden, then that's great. Like, we have the volunteers, we have people interested in giving back in that manner. We also found, as we were doing more and more research, is that 75% of our young donors disengage when they don't see a good website. Then it's a question of legitimacy for that nonprofit. We also have seen that when you apply for grants, especially with the government, some of those applications will require you to have a website. And there's a host of them that will say, well, if we can't verify your website, then sorry, we can't provide you donor money. Now, it's chicken and egg sometimes, but we know that we can solve this problem. So that's sort of why we're here today. The next is our vision tenets, just so you know about 4848 as far as how do we specifically work, what do we think is important? Well, we're improving society through marketing and technology volunteerism, education and service. This is both for our volunteers and for our nonprofits, because we don't leave them out. We're mobilizing the technology volunteers very, very specifically, and they are worldwide. And our tenets and values are also listed here. This helps us drive forward as an organization. And here's now a list of some of our sponsors. So over the past 6 years, we've had a number of sponsors, like I mentioned earlier, that we can't do this work without our sponsors. So 2020, we lost a lot of sponsorship, as every other nonprofit did. Our two top sponsors that we've had through our lifetime are Verizon and Delta. Delta is the one that we started with, but knowing what happened with the pandemic, I don't have to explain to you, it's a good reason that Delta said, well, we really just can't support you right now. Let's talk next year. So that's sort of where we are with Delta. Verizon has stepped up and said, hey, you know what, we love what you're doing, we love what you're giving back to the community, we're going to help sponsor your events. So just a quick look at who our partners are and who our sponsors are. Now, this quote I love here. It's from one of our nonprofits, and I think it's really important that nonprofits recognize that there is a value to having a website, especially now in COVID, when you can't go out and hold one-on-one meetings, you can't speak in front of a group of people. So I felt like this was important to share with you guys because it comes directly from a nonprofit. And many of you may feel like you're in the same bucket or you've solved this problem, but for your own purposes and for my purposes, I feel like it's really a great direction, and that's what we want to focus on. This is what we want to do. This is what our people want to do. The next slide shows, well, what type of nonprofits do we work with? So, you know, if we take our 950 websites that we've built in the past 6 years and we break them up into different categories, this is how they shape out. Now, this is obviously live and changing all the time, but we do measure ourselves accordingly. You'll see that there's a lot of sites that we'll do in any given year that could be on education or the environment, healthcare, housing, women's empowerment. There's humanities. And so as we update through, I can tell you this year from 2020 and this year as we start our events this year, so many of our nonprofits have to deal with humanities, right? Civil rights and humanities. And I think it's really important that I help you understand that as far as we're concerned, your nonprofit can service the nonprofit community in any category, and you're eligible for a free website. Here's some numbers, just very specifically on what we've accomplished through the years. And as we look at our websites, when we look at our teams that are built and the amount of time they put together, we came up with like a blended rate of the value of each website that we're giving back, which is anywhere between $20,000 and $25,000 worth of service for each website. Because if you can't calculate the 6 to 8 people that are going to be focused on your website for a 48-hour period, and we do a blended rate, we did simple math, and that's how we get to our numbers. This year, we will reach a huge milestone. In April, we have a women's event where we will build our 1,000th website. So if we calculate all the numbers back and forth, that will mean that our volunteers have given back $25 million worth of service. So we think that's a pretty big milestone, and the calculations come from agency costs and everything packaged together with technology. So we're very, very proud of that effort. The next slide, I think, Tim, these, we don't have to play the video here because it might be better when we share out the slides, so for people to, you know, watch the videos, because a couple that are embedded in here as takeaways for you. But here's just a snapshot of people. So we're a hackathon style event. We are an on-site, you know, from our original start point was on-site only. And this would just be one group of people that would have shown up. We typically have about 200 people. We need at least 200 people to sort of make this happen on a 48 perspective. But anywhere between that 200 and up to 450 to 500 people we've had show up at our events doing different things. All right, so then by now you're thinking, all right, well, this sounds good, but really, how's it work? Really, how do I get involved, and what is the real value? And like Dave mentioned, he's like, anytime you tell somebody that something's free, it's like, no, not really. There's got to be a catch somewhere. And I think we're all very conscious about that, because the word free is thrown around a lot in all types of advertising, emails that you get on a regular basis, any kind of subscriptions that you're free is always there. So we go to the next slide. I'll talk you through where we are. So from a nonprofit perspective, like I told you, each site has a value of $25,000, and it is free for the nonprofit. All our events, and we call them signature events, right? All our events are hosted either online or in person. So right now we're still working online. All our websites are built on WordPress, so it's an open source platform. We also use Beaver Builder and as our supplemental platform with all premium plugins. Now, this allows us to control the type of site being built, meaning we have specific parameters, because we know we have 48 hours to build this. If we had 4 weeks to build it, it would be sort of totally different, and we'd be able to allow for maybe different options. But being that we are using these specific platforms on WordPress and Beaver Builder, it allows us to move forward. So what do you get at the end of this? If you decide that you would like to have a free website built for you, you would get a website built by professionals, and then you'd also receive 1 month of free hosting on our platform or on our hosting service, our hosting provider. So 4848 doesn't do hosting like by itself, but we have a partner that we do it with, and they offer free hosting for a month. After that, you can take your files to another hosting provider wherever you are, and that is completely up to you, or you can stay with our hosting and hosting provider, right? That's just the choice that we give to you. You would pay for hosting no matter where you went, so there's no catch there. Your website is still free. In order to qualify, you need to be a legal nonprofit with your 501(c)(3) documentation, or 501(c)(3), yes, documentation. And your overall revenue's got to be less than 3 million, which all of our nonprofits are even less than 500,000 when it comes to revenue perspective. So we typically don't worry about it. The cap was put in from a long time ago, and you know, I don't know that it maybe it's the lowest benchmark there, but as far as we're concerned, we've never had to question, oh, do you actually have more than this amount of revenue? Because if you do, you're not looking at us. We require one person to be available to fill out paperwork that we need, and then also to do some Q&A with our teams as the sites are getting built. And you know, we ask that we also disqualify nonprofits that are proselytizing. So we want to make sure that, you know, we are middle of the road, supporting everybody that we can. We are not involved in other types of recruitment type activities. And to find more information about our nonprofits and what the rules are in more detail, you can definitely go to our website, which is 4848.org/nonprofit. So the question then comes to, all right, so then what is the cost? Again, this is a really important question. Well, it's coursework number 1 and coursework number 2. So prior to this, if you're interested, you will have filled out a short application on our website, which takes, I think, about 8 minutes total, if you have all the information in front of you. And then coursework 1 is a branding questionnaire. So it'll ask you what you think of your brand. And maybe it'll drive you to think about things that you've not thought about before. This branding questionnaire literally was created by an agency. So agencies that do digital work helped us create this branding questionnaire. And then after you're done with the branding questionnaire, you do a content questionnaire. So all of this information is your cost, right? So if you think you're, you know, paying for anything, you're paying us by doing the coursework. And you have to do the coursework on time, within registration timelines, in order to be involved or in the pipeline for a nonprofit event, nonprofit build event. And
a quick clarifying question. In terms of the way you're describing it, what you're saying is it's time is money, essentially, that the cost is you're giving the time to do this, not that the courses themselves actually have the cost that they're paying for.
Agreed. Yes, I'm sorry if I didn't clarify that. Yeah, you're completing coursework. That is your cost, your time, the time that it takes you to complete these 2 pieces. Now, I will tell you that these coursework pieces are not things that you can do in 10 minutes. We typically say that it'll take you at least 2 to 3 hours to complete each piece, depending on if you've been through this process before with your brand or not. And also depending on how many people you need to get involved in order to answer some of these questions. And yes, we ask the basic questions about your mission and what your vision is, and if you have a mission statement or a vision statement and things like that. But we also go back and we ask you, well, you know, if you could have a website that looked like any website, what are your top 3? Share those with us. And why do you like certain brands? Are there competitors in your same space? Is there another nonprofit doing something similar to what you're doing? And is there something that they're doing that you feel like, hey, we would like to have a website that looks similar to this, or included these type of features? What kind of information do you want on your website? Some of our nonprofits, you literally have just Facebook pages. So they're like, all my information's on a Facebook page. And we're like, all right, well, let's figure out how we can get all your information from there into this content, and then what you're missing, you make up. So keep that in the back of your head, that this is not a quick 10-minute process. As we're going to take 48 hours to build your website, you're going to need to take, definitely, put aside 5 hours or so, 5 to 6 hours to complete this coursework.
Right.
And if you get stuck anywhere, we do have people that can help.
Perfect. We have a couple of other questions that just came in, if you don't mind. Was after the first month, or after the 1 month free host on the website, what is the cost? The actual dollar?
Yes. So I have details on that later on the slide, but just so you know, we have different hosting packages where if it's just hosting only, then there's a $30 cost for just hosting only. And I think our pricing actually is changing now because we've upgraded to a new provider, which is going to be more cost effective, but we will have multiple packages. One is that I only need you to host my site because I have somebody on my nonprofit that can make all the updates that I need to, so I won't need that support. Or you have another option, which is hosting and support, which means at any point in time, if you want something changed on your website, you would fill out a ticket and that would go to a support desk, and then the support desk would take care of making those changes, whether it be changing images, content on your website. We build these websites so that they can be managed by you. And the whole point of us using WordPress and an open source tool or platform is that we can actually give it back to you, and you shouldn't have to invest in hiring somebody from the outside to do things for you, because that becomes very costly. When you try to get a WordPress developer in on an hourly basis, you could pay $50 or $50 to $60 easily per hour of their time. Our costs are that you would pay that $60 for a month, and then you would have the services available to you, and you just fill out a ticket and that work gets done. So there's a little bit of difference there. So it just depends what your budget can allow and what resources you have in order to support what you need to.
Great. And that is all optional. That is, if you just want to participate and give the website back to them, they've already got a hosting rate, provider, then it still stays free of charge. Right.
Well, it stays with the site is always going to be free. The site development piece is always free. Your hosting provider, wherever you decide to take it to, then you would just take whatever you pay your hosting provider. Let's say that you use GoDaddy. Fine. We build your site, we host it for 30 days for free, and then in 30 days it just gets migrated to it would get migrated back to GoDaddy. And there is a process that you have to go through in order for that migration to happen. And there may be costs associated with that from your provider as well, to say, okay, if you're migrating a new site over here, that's a hosting migration cost that will come. But there's never going to be a cost for the website itself, because that development work is done within the weekend that we have framed up.
And if an organization already has a website, is that problematic, or does that hold them back, or can they continue? Can they still take part in this?
Oh no, they can definitely participate. Websites are usually dated after about 2.5 to 3 years. So a lot of the websites that we work on were something that was kind of hashed together or put together by somebody's son, and over one holiday weekend, or over a holiday time period, and then someone else had it and then they added. So it's like little band-aid fixes as the site grew, but there was no collective process. The UX, user experience, is not good, or the imagery is really old and bad, or maybe it's not very stable anymore because links are broken. So there's loads of things that can happen when you've had a website created but not properly maintained. And like with anything, there are trends for websites, there are trends for design, and those change all the time. So we will typically take a website, take a look at it and say, all right, is this a website that we can improve in 48 hours? And we have certain checklists and parameters that we go through. And if it is something that we can do and implement and make better for you, then definitely we'll take you on. Now, because our event happens in 48 hours only, you can imagine that amount of time is still going to limit us to what we can do. So the typical website we build will be from 12 to 14 pages. We will not have a heavy e-commerce engine on it. We are building a basic standard site. We do have plugins, and we can connect to donation portals and calendaring and all of those things that we call standard and basic. So it'd be important for you to understand what you are asking for. If your site is an extremely like specialized site where you've got lots of different things going on, that's when I would say that maybe you wouldn't qualify for something that we would give you, because it would be too simple for you. But other than that, this shouldn't be a problem.
Terrific, thank you. We got one more question here. So in our coursework, we will learn enough to do simple maintenance and updates to the content for our site, correct?
So no, in the coursework, you're giving us information about how your site needs to be built. That's what the coursework is. The coursework is you telling me what your brand is, what you want to look like, what your content is, where it should go, what your vision is for your website, your ultimate website. That's the coursework. As far as education is concerned, we do that through Impact Labs. So during our event, we have our event kicks off at 6 o'clock on a Friday, and it ends at around 6 o'clock on a Sunday. On a Saturday, which will come down in one of the next slides when you see our overall plan, you're invited to look at your homepage because it's going to be ready. It's going to be built. It's one of the major milestones that we have. And then after that, your team will show you what your secondary and tertiary pages will look like. And they'll also share with you the content they're using, imagery they're using, things like that. And you have time to sit with the team and give them feedback. Now, our process starts 12 to 16 weeks prior to an event. So, for example, we have an event coming up on April 9th. Registration's already closed for that. Nonprofits have already been committed for it, and the teams are already set up, and the teams are already making contact with their nonprofits right now. They're reading over the coursework, making sure they understand what everything is. So when they get ready to build on Friday the 9th, they have all the information they need. This will be multiple contacts with the project manager or even the build teams, so the communication is free and flowing. And then the night of the event, and I say the night of the event because we kick off at 6 o'clock, we go through an opening ceremony, the team gets together, and then they usually get on the phone with the nonprofit to say, okay, we're ready, we're building today, we're going to clarify this, or here are additional questions that have come up since the last time we chatted. That happens there, so there's constant communication over the weekend on things that are happening. And if the nonprofit is available, then that makes it easier for the team to get the answers they need. So by noontime on Saturday, the homepage is ready. And then the plan for the rest of the pages is already in place, and you can give as much feedback as necessary. And then on Sunday, the site will go into a QA and an accessibility review, and then it'll be ready to launch, and you'll get to see that link as well before it launches.
Phenomenal. All right, why don't we go ahead and hop back into the presentation, and I'm sure, just like you just did, more questions will get clarified as we go along.
Fantastic. So here's what your team looks like. So we hit on this a little bit. The project manager is your main point of contact. They're the ones that will reach out to you first and say, okay, I've been assigned, here's my plan, let's talk through the team. Let's talk through the team. They'll introduce, if the whole team gets online, then you'll meet your digital marketer, your WordPress developer, your graphics designer, and your content creator. Your first call may just be with the project manager, your second calls might be with the additional team members. And they'll be asking you questions on the branding and the content coursework that you've completed. And just remember, all of these people do this for a living. And so here's our event overview. So something that I decided, I was walking through with you guys earlier. So here's our run our show, knowing that we are a weekend event only, so we're not taking away time from their regular day jobs, but at the same time, they're giving up their weekends, right? So in blue is where the nonprofit is optional that you can attend, right? So you don't have to, your nonprofit does not need to exist in the city where we're holding the event, or right now, as we are doing even virtual events, it's like, doesn't really matter where you exist, which time zone you exist in. We have teams in every single time zone, which is quite incredible. But on Friday at 6 o'clock, we have an opening program. This is mainly an internal opening program for all the volunteers to come together. And then we introduce the planning committee. We sort of give the kudos to everyone that's working. We have guest speakers, and we move on from there. And then by 7 o'clock, the teams are walking away going, all right, we're ready to start building. So this is when they gather up. Now you'll see at 9 o'clock, about 9 o'clock, it'll say, okay, teams are going to hold a conference call with a nonprofit. It's a touch base. Your project manager will have decided or had a discussion with you by that time to say, is 9 o'clock good for you? Is 8 o'clock better for you? Whatever that timing is. And if you've had enough conversation prior, they'll say, we'll just talk to you in the morning on Saturday, right? So that's something that we just let happen organically. Like, we don't feel like we need to control it. Then on Saturday by 11 o'clock, we do everything in Eastern time. So by 11 o'clock, we're asking everybody to have their home pages ready. They'll go through an accessibility, first round of accessibility on just the home page to make sure that, hey, everything's placed in the right place. We're getting what we need to. And there's an accessibility scale. And so we try really, really hard to make sure all our websites are above 85 on the accessibility point range. By 12 noon, the nonprofits, when we are meeting in person, you actually get to come into the location we're at and meet the team in person, and then also see your website and have that talking session. While we're virtual, we do this virtually. We haven't had a problem. We have an online portal that we use, so it's kind of like a conference portal online. And you'll be able to enter that and speak to your nonprofit. Speak to your team that's building your site. Then by 3 o'clock, and this, bear with me on the timings because they change depending on the number of people and the number of nonprofits we have in each time zone. But in the afternoon, we offer nonprofit impact labs. These impact labs is where we kind of give you an SEO 101, social media 101, WordPress 101, like how do you go in and do these things. We have volunteers from the agency world that come and do these live sessions that say, these are the things you need to remember. You're going to get your new website, but here's how you're going to walk through it. If you want to make a change, if you want to change a photo, if you want to change content, this is how you access it, and here's how you make changes. They also talk to you about overall marketing, which you may not have heard, from other people before, going, okay, well, what should you be thinking about with your new website? How should you be marketing? What pieces need to link together? And so depending on the different types of volunteers that we have, we do impact labs. That'll probably take an hour and a half to 2 hours, depending on which sessions you want to attend. And there's usually, the sessions are anywhere between 30 and 45 minutes. So not everything that you have to know, but high level, like what is it that you need to know and how would you go about it, and then resources on how you would be able to move forward. Then on Sunday, basically we have our final check-in, our QA is done for the websites. By 4 o'clock, we want sites completed. And then internally around 5 o'clock, we have our own little judging, which we're giving bragging rights to the top 3 sites, honorable mentions for design, honorable mentions for specific content. And those judges are typically people from our sponsored organizations. So they have, people in marketing areas or creative directors. We have them come and we have them look at the 48 sites, and it's really a quick glance at the homepage. Do we understand mission? Is it pleasing? Those basic things. But they go through that process. It provides a bit of a win for our volunteers because there's always going to be first, second, and third place. There's always going to be some honorable mentions. So it's additional for that team more so than anything else. And then by the end of that evening, all of the sites start to go live. Now, typically all our sites go live within 24 hours of the event. Some sites take a little longer to propagate just because of where they've been sitting or how they've been configured, but you can pretty much be guaranteed that most every single site will be launched and live within 48 hours of that event. All right, so next slide is, here again, it's just what is the catch? And I keep coming back to this simply because I think a lot of people have the same questions, right? The WordPress site is built, it is your site. You migrate it to wherever you want to. You're able to edit it as soon as it goes live. It'll go, and if you don't like it, you don't have to launch it. You can just say, no, it just doesn't hit everything that I want. Okay, fine. We don't usually have that happen, but the option is there because it is your site. Ultimately, you can revert back to your original site if you decide that that's not what you want. The only people that know that that's happening are the people that are taking the sites live. So your team won't typically know. We won't tell your team, oh, well, you spent the weekend building this, but they didn't want to go live. So you won't ever hear anything else from anybody else at 48 and 48 regarding that, because it's your choice. So 30 days on, we've talked about how that we're hosting that for free, and then there's migration. So migration goes to wherever you want. We have a post-migration team that we can also connect you with that will help migrate the sites and migrate the files if the directions provided are not clear enough. Let's see, maintenance. So maintenance, so we have to remember that 4848 builds on Beaver Builder. We'll use premium plugins, we'll use every feature and functionality that we have. So as you decide to move to another hosting provider, you would just want to check with them and say, hey, do you have these plugins? And we can provide you with all of that information. And typically, there'll be the bells and whistles that make your site different or more appealing. And that's not to say that that's not available anywhere else. I'm just saying that you would want to consider that as a cost. We pay for them within our services and as we host them, but another provider might ask you to pay a little bit extra because of the certain plugin. We cannot remove plugins because it's the way that your site is built, so you would lose functionality. So, but it's important for you to know that your site is handed off to you as a package, and when you take it over to another group, whether GoDaddy or whatever, they'll just tell you, yep, we've got these, you might just need to pay $5 extra. So be aware of that, and that's just about as clear as we can possibly be. When something's not working on our side, like I said, support happens through a support ticket process, and you shouldn't have any problem getting the support you need. All right, here, a cost again, we've talked about it already. So, you know, knowing that the site, while it's under our control, for that 30 days, there's no additional cost to you. That's the main thing here. Your domain name, your hosting, hopefully you have all those things in place. And if you don't, then we can also help you with that. Like, we have people that we partner with that can help with different pieces of it. I think this one's probably a lot of the same stuff that we've mentioned. Just what we want to make sure you understand is what you're paying for, what you're getting, and then where you need to go to get more information so that you make the best decision for your website. Here's where we talk a little about plugins, and it's more detail for you to take away and look at later, but it is a question of you know, making sure that you're getting apples to apples. So at the end of the day, we want you to be happy with your website the way we've created it, and then if you take it somewhere else, we want it to work perfectly. So we're always going to make sure that you have all the information you need to make sure that that works to your benefit, because at the end of the day, you're the one that's servicing that nonprofit, and your nonprofit is servicing your community. So, you know, if you don't have everything that you need, then we've not completely done our job properly. And I think that is the end of it. I would like to tell you that for this current year, for 2021, we have 3 events that we've got on our roadmap. So our first event is a Women's Build event, and the Women's Build event specifically showcases the talent of women. And it is all of our website build teams will be completely made with women. We do have allies of support with men, and they may be running some things on the background, but as far as building the websites, it will be all women. And it is really specific because we designed it to make sure that we are bringing more awareness to women that are working in technology and in marketing and in digital forms. Because a lot of times they seem like, oh, it's just a man's job. Well, it's not. Nothing's a man's job anymore. So we wanted to showcase that. We wanted to make sure we brought more awareness to it. So we will have that event from April the 9th through the 11th. And like I said, it's already full. Our next event coming up is a social justice event. The social justice event is June the 9th through, no, sorry, June 11th through 13th. And that specific event will work around nonprofits that are either founded by, run by, or serve persons of color. And also if they are very specific to racial equality or social justice initiatives that they're having. So we will not turn away any nonprofit in any of our events, but very specifically, we'd like to focus on that group to bring awareness to that group. But that doesn't mean that if you run a charity that's specifically for that supports animals and, you know, welfare of animals, that we would just say, oh, no, you can't be a part of the event. That's not possible. We're building 48, so we'll find a spot for you to get built. And then our third event that we're doing as just a 40 and 48 organization is the global event. So our global event will happen in October 1st, the first weekend in October. And that event specifically is open to any nonprofit anywhere in the world, including volunteers anywhere in the world. Now, that being said, last year when we held our global event, we had close to 500 volunteers globally building websites. We built 63 websites over the weekend, and that included majority of the sites in the US, but then also in Europe and in Asia. So I know that I went through and I was looking at all the different time zones that the planning committee was working with, and there was 16 different time zones in 15 different countries where we had either nonprofits or volunteers. So just wanted to share the magnitude of what our organization is doing with you, so that you could understand that it's small because we're doing it community by community in one respect, but then it is quite global because we share it. We share all of our skills, all our volunteers across the board. And 4848 as an organization, we don't have any full-time people. We only have part-time paid people, and those are a handful, and the rest of our organization is run by volunteers. The support of the organizations that I showed you earlier is instrumental in our success because, one, they fund us, and then they also provide volunteers in order to make this happen. And it's because they're hitting whatever corporate responsibility initiatives they have, and we're fortunate to be able to do that. In addition to our regular events, or our events that are initiative-based this year, as opposed to previous years where there would have been an event in Atlanta, New York, Boston, Dallas, etc., city by city, we've pivoted to initiative-based for this year, and we are all virtual, so we'll stay all virtual at least until next year, and then we'll see what happens, like how we can move forward. So if you're interested, please go to our website at 4848.org. Check on the menu side for nonprofits. You'll see the events. You'll see all the information that you have with registration deadlines in order to make it through our process. And with that, Dave, if there's any other additional questions, happy to answer questions or hand it over to you.
Perfect, thank you. And I'm going to pop that website up on the screen here so you can see what it looks like. But while I'm working on that, we do have a question here. Is there a limit to the number of persons that you enroll in each session? And again, sort of how do they get involved? You mentioned going to the website, but if you could just run through that one more time, just to make sure we're all on the same page.
So is the question, how does a nonprofit get involved, or how does a volunteer get involved? Because
good question. Yeah, if they wanted to have a website made,
okay,
what's the process look like?
There isn't a limit. Like all of our limits, I guess, well, let me rephrase that. Our limits are dictated by the number of volunteers that we have. So, the reason we were able to build 63 websites in October of last year is because we had so many volunteers, and we also had a pipeline of nonprofits that wanted a site, right? So for the women's event, for example, right now, I have 48 websites that are committed. I have seven or eight websites right now in a pipeline that's saying, if you get an additional team, then I'd like to be a part of it. Now, just this morning, actually, I got a report that there are 50 teams available, so I can pull 2 more nonprofits out from the wait list and build them. So it has to be equal, right? Like I have to have those build teams. So when I showed you the skill sets that are needed for one team, that has to be available in order for us to make one full team and attach it to a nonprofit for the best experience possible. We strive for 48, but there have been events where we've done less than 48, and then we've done more than 48. So it really just depends on what we get from a volunteer perspective, because it is heavily based on it. If we don't have a WordPress developer or a designer for a team, well then we know that that's not going to be successful. So we need to make sure that we recruit further. We don't have that problem right now, quite honestly. Being that it's a remote thing, there's more availability for people, but that's the only thing that would be our limiting factor, is just the number of volunteers that are available.
Wonderful. And I seem to be having an issue connecting to the website, so I apologize for not being able to bring that up. But we do have some folks who are in here who do support people who are volunteers. So what would it look like if they had individuals who they knew of who would like to help construct these websites? Is that available to them? Can they get involved? And what does that process look like?
That's the same thing as well. And I'm sorry you're having trouble with the website, but just as you navigate to 4848.org, there is an option that you can sign up to be a volunteer. So there's a page that tells you, okay, here's the events, here's the volunteer process, and then here's the nonprofit process. So as a volunteer, you'd go in there and tick off which skill set you particularly have that you'd want to fulfill. Now, you could be a project manager, designer, developer, content person, digital marketer. You would check those off because they're form fields. Once that happens, you get put into the volunteer pipeline. And then when we close all of the registration for the volunteers, then the team goes back in and pulls the people together and creates them. All right, like they create team 1, 2, 3, 4, kind of like that. If you work with an organization where you've got 2, 3, 4, maybe all of the skill sets, and you wanted to have one team on just your name, then you sign up as a team and everybody uses the same team name and they're all grouped together. So you can sign up as an individual or as a team. Either way, we will match you with a nonprofit. And the matching really is just based on skill sets. It's not based on your interests. So we don't have a process in place to where you want to work on websites that specifically focus on sustainability. So please put me on a nonprofit that works with sustainability. We typically don't have that happen. That's something that we're just not evolved enough to do. But if you were to nominate a nonprofit, like you know of a nonprofit and you wanted to work on that nonprofit, that's not a problem. Does that answer that question?
That's great. Yeah. So what I'm going to do, everybody, is open up your microphones. So if you would like to verbally ask a question, you may. Jan, I just saw your question come in. Do you want to go ahead and turn on your mic and ask about that? Or no?
Okie doke. Good morning.
Good morning.
My question is, I have 2 community foundations. They are exactly the same except for their logo. So would I need to register for 2 separate teams, or could just one team do that, do the work to build the websites, because the logo is the only difference? And that would also give me consistency between my 2 separate community foundations.
So you would register with one. Is the URL with one URL? As far as the logo and content is concerned, and our teams could just make that available for both, right? So we'd need to know both of them so that we could set up 2 sites and make sure that even if the information is just copied over, I'm assuming that you've got it hosted separately.
No, we don't have a website, and both of my foundations want to put up a website this year.
Okay. Well, then, even if it's all the same information, what we would do is we'd probably assign it just to one team, but they would just need to know 2 of them. So sign up with the one, and then what I can do is I can have our nonprofit relationship manager contact you, work through the details, and then they can make sure that it's assigned the way that you need it to be assigned, and people understand that it's the same. It's just 2 versions of it.
Yes. Great. Perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm curious, when you ask those questions about the brand and you sort of look at identifying color palettes and styles and that sort of thing, if an organization wanted to keep that up and continue to use that same branding for other things that they're doing, will they get a copy of the types of style elements that you used, whether it was fonts or the brand colors or things like that? Or is there anything they walk away with that kind of helps guide them in terms of using that style guide for the rest, or brand guide for the rest of their work?
So the answer is sort of like a maybe, because there are some teams that will be able to, just like anybody else, some teams will be able to whip out this site and have it done very, very quickly. And at the end of the day, they've got a little bit of extra time. So when they have their extra time, or if they have an extra resource or something like that, they'll create a brand guidelines document. Now, obviously, the fonts they use, the colors they use, they're all documented. It's just a matter of whether they've got time to package it up in a nice, clean manner so that they can share it out with you. And at the end of the day, all of that information is definitely available. You just want to coordinate with your project manager and say, hey, can I get brand guidelines with this? Because then when I go to create XYZ somewhere else, I can make sure I'm using the right font or colors or whatever. And the teams don't have a problem, just like they don't have a problem designing a new logo. If you're like, hey, I like it, logo, could you keep the colors but try to give me something new? And there's people from a design perspective, designers, especially extras, that will do that. We have teams that also work with email templates. Like, oh, help us create an email template. So when we go into a position and we've got campaigns we're creating, we have something. So all of that effort is available. It is clearly 100% dependent on the volunteers. So we won't guarantee that it's available for every team at all times, because again, it's all volunteer based. But that is just a request that we put into the project manager to say, hey, while you're designing my website, please create me a new logo. Can you see if somebody can do that? That's usually an easy ask and not a problem. If you're interested in any of those other pieces, you just ask and they can basically come back to the planning committee and also the event committee that runs the event and see where the resources are to be able to help on other things as well.
No. All right. Well, everybody, let me put my camera back on here. We have reached the 10 o'clock hour, or just about. I want to give a huge thank you to Seema and 4848 for being here and doing this work. You know, as all of you know, when you're small and trying to figure it out, there's a million little details and it can be overwhelming and difficult. And if you don't have certain skill sets, it makes it even harder. And so having your support and your dedication to the nonprofit sector is incredible and appreciated. And I love the structure. And I have to say, when we were talking and sort of meeting before all of this, I really loved how much care you put into giving people education about, you know, the structures that you're going to be providing, and also asking them to think critically through the two courses. So, really love all that you all are doing, and I look forward to staying in touch. For everybody else in the room, I'm going to do what we always do, which is share just a tiny, tiny bit of information here. So let me go ahead and switch what is being shown. I apologize about that. Okay, so on your screen, you will see coming up on May 7th, the Nonprofits and Money Seminar, Giving and Getting with Purpose. This is going to be an incredible 5-hour event. It will start at 10 a.m. with a training on Giveology, Secrets to Raising Money, More Money Faster and Easier with Robin Thompson. We will take an hour break for lunch, and then when we come back, we're going to have a 2-hour panel discussion with Michelle Connolly, Sandy Young, Steve Azar, and we have one more panelist who will be joining us, and that will be announced hopefully by the end of the day today. You can attend in person or virtually. If you want to attend virtually, great. You take part just like you would any other training. If you would like to attend in person, we have 4 phenomenal sites located around the state where you can go and engage. And I want to say the best part of all, but one of the great things is that this does not cost any more than our regular trainings. So this qualifies for the $25 monthly special. So if you or your team members want to join, please sign up. We would love to have you and to get all this great information out there. So definitely sign up if you can. And with all of that, thank you again for taking the time to be here. Really appreciate that, and we look forward to engaging with you in the future. Have a wonderful day, and again, thank you, Seema, and the entire 4848 team.
Thank you, Dave.